It will just be me on the recording. Hey, welcome. So here we are. I'm Phil. This is Discover Tai Chi for Limb Power, and we're going to get stuck in. So seated, standing. I'll do my combination of being seated or standing. I'll keep my box near. We're going to dive into the 8 strands of brocade because in some respects we haven't visited it in a while, and for some people it might be quite new or even brand new. Let's do 2 hands hold the sky, the very first movement. So if you're seated, try to take that torso of yours a little away from the back of the seat if you are in a seat or a chair, so that you're self-supporting. But if you do need the back of a chair for support, then please do use it. And we're going to start with our hands like so. It's a bit like ballet. Hands in this kind of position, and then we just bring them up, turn them over and press up. Mine might disappear a little bit, not too much, and then they fall away. Let me move away from my blinds. Fall away. And that's the movement. It's called 2 hands hold the sky. Turn over, press up within a comfortable range for you, and then let the hands fall away like free fall in slow motion, all the way down to the fingertips. If I turn to the side, you can see that I pick the hands up relatively close, turn over, push up slightly forwards, and then let the hands fall away. 2 hands hold the sky. If you wish, you can take a big breath in, and as the hands and arms lift overhead, that helps the rib cage open so that we get even more air into the lungs, and then as we let the hands drop, we just have a nice easy breath out. So that might be an option. Breathing is I was going to say not compulsory, but actually it is, isn't it? But breathing with the movement isn't compulsory, but keep breathing. It's a silly old joke, but it's the key to a long life. Okay, here we go. One more. So we're just moving slowly, mindfully, deliberately or purposefully with that first opening movement. Excellent. You know what? I'll flip-flop between seated and standing for each movement. So I'm going to sit down, but keep standing if you are. And we do archer. So we're going to imagine that we release an arrow to each side, and we just alternate that movement. Let's bring our right hand covering the left hand in front of us. This kind of archery, we've got to imagine that we're on a Mongolian pony galloping across the Mongol plains. There's an image for you. We're going to take this right hand, take a thick bowstring, draw the bow as we look to the left, push into the back of the bow. When we've extended our draw, we let the arrow fly, and we extend that right hand and arm, and then both hands drop down. And then we cross the left hand over the right, and we do a similar thing, drawing the bow with the left hand on this bowstring, pushing into the back of the bow with the right hand, and then we release that arrow smoothly. So if any of you have shot bows and arrows, I know some of you have, you'll know that it's more about the chest and the shoulders and this sense of expanding into the bow as we do so. So think of it that way if you can. So if we just practice the movement, first of all, of a smooth draw, looking into the distance, releasing the arrow and watching it fly away. And then we might get the notion, okay, maybe I could take a breath in as I draw the bow. And on the very moment that I start to breathe out, that's the cue to release the arrow in one smooth breath. That can lend a nice kind of fluency to the movement as we go from one side to the other. But again, that's optional. If at any point things begin to feel labored or contrived in terms of the breathing, just focus on the movement. Your breathing will take care of itself. And that's a jolly good thing. I'm going to do one more draw. Don't worry if we're out of sync. There you go. You should begin to sort of feel that through the shoulders, a good shoulder strengthener. Next movement is parting the earth from the sky. So I'm going to stand up again. If you're seated, stay seated. Let me take my glasses off. Why do I have them on the top of my head? I don't know. So we're going to hold a beach ball. Doesn't matter which hand on top. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see. Hands and arms are away from my torso. It's the bottom hand that we're interested in. Doesn't matter which one. We bring that forward and up. It's a bit like two hands hold the sky, only when we turn it over and push up, the other hand, the bottom hand, pushes down. And we create this kind of S shape. We turn the palms and we bring them back together until we hold our beach ball. And we find that the hands have swapped places. Focus on the bottom hand, bring it up, turn it over. We're keeping the hands on the center line, so directly above the head and directly in front of the hips. If you're standing, if you sat down, you may have to kind of just either not go so far with that bottom hand, or if you can kind of squeeze it between knees, that will do. And we just alternate. Very simple. Takes a little bit of coordination at first, so don't worry if it's not quite as optimal as you would like. Just go through the motions. Similar to two hands hold the sky, if you wish, you can have an in-breath as we lift overhead and push down, and then an out-breath as the hands come back together. If you wish, again, don't force for breath. Think tall as well, whether we're seated or standing, tall with the push of the hands, and then kind of have a sense of letting everything relax and come back together as we bring the hands back to holding our beach ball. And we're going to do one more. So there's no count. You do as many as you feel. Just like that. Good stuff. Have a little relax, have a little shake maybe. If you're standing, maybe a little move. If you're sat down, you might need to shift some weight from hip to relieve pressure. I'm going to bring my box back and sit down for the fourth movement. Okay. Rotation. Wise owl. That's the name of the movement. Very simple, turning to look over our right shoulder and then our left shoulder. This is where we need to be mindful of some things that might be in our vicinity. So just be mindful of that. Try not to knock anything over because we're going to lift our hands and arms as we do the turn. I like to think of this as someone calling your name on the right and you look to see who it is, and then someone calls your name on the left and you do the same. But as we turn to see who has called your name, I'm turning to the right, we gently lift our palms and arms outstretched, and then we just let everything relax back as we turn back to the center. That's the movement. Turning to the left to see who's called our name. Looking into the distance and then gently turning back to where we came from. That's the movement. Turning to the right. Lifting, looking. Don't overdo it. Keep it as natural as you can. And again, left side. And again, you may have the kind of intuitive notion that we could have an in-breath as we turn and lift. And then that out-breath just fits very nicely as we let the hands and arms go. So if you would like to do that, you can. But just like with all the other 3 movements that we've done, don't force things. It might be that you just do it once or twice on each side. I'm going to turn to the left for the last time. And then gently back, just like so. Let's kind of do a variation. There's lots of variations and extensions to these movements. So let's stick with that rotation because it's an important movement for us. So instead of being hands outstretched, we're going to have both hands gesturing in the same direction. If I'm turning to the right, the left hand kind of joins it as I gesture. Okay, that was just an example. Should we go together? So I turn to the right. The left hand kind of joins or supports the right hand as I gesture in the direction in which I look. And then sweep back down and then to the left. And you may find that by bringing the opposite hand around to support the other hand and arm, that you get a bit more range of motion simply as a consequence of doing that. And you've got the option of the breath if you wish. I'm going to go once more to the right and once more to the left. Excellent. And that gets us halfway. 4 movements. Let me stand up. The next 2 movements, they're bigger, more dynamic. They challenge our balance, whether we're seated or standing. We need to be mindful that if we're prone to dizziness or vertigo, then we need to be a bit more careful with these movements because they involve the head moving through sort of time and space, and that can induce a little bit of vertigo or dizziness. Not terribly so, because we're going to go nice and slowly, but again, don't feel as though you need to go too far. Next movement is called sway the head, so that gives us a clue as to what's happening. We're imagining that there's a rope in front of us running away, and we need to duck under that rope, like so. It's maybe a movement that you've done. So let's start off with a very high rope. Okay, and then as you get confident and feel comfortable with the movement, you can imagine that the rope gets lower if that feels right for you. I'm placing my hands on my hips. I'm turning a little bit to my right, and then I'm just going to duck a little bit and drop underneath my rope, pop up on the left side, bring myself upright, and then go back the way I came, left to right, under my imaginary rope. If you sat down, it's often easier to just have the hands on the tops of the thighs. They act as a bit of support, if that helps. Okay. Check in, make sure you feel okay, and then if you do, we go once more. We focus on the movement rather than the breath, and we go nice and steady. Taking our time to just get a feel for how that is for muscles of the back and the torso, the neck and the head are all having to support that movement as we do so. It's big, demands a lot, especially if we're standing, but also if we're seated. Okay, good one to do if you've been seated for a long time or you're someone who uses a wheelchair. Okay, I'm going to do one more to each side. Okay, so one more in your own time. Just focusing on that movement. Last one for me. Excellent. Up we come. Whew. Right. That's our first movement of this pair that's a bit more demanding. Let me return to being seated. Second movement. Again, it's going to involve a hinge of the hips where we flex and bend at the hips. If you're standing up, hands are going to come onto the backs of the thighs when we get there. For those of us who are sat down, hands can either come onto the sides of the thighs or even the tops of the thighs and just follow along. We start off the movement. It's called hold the toes. That gives us a clue. Not that we're aiming to hold our toes, I should hasten to add. We might only get as far as our knees or the tops of our thighs. Okay, no prizes for bendy boys or bendy girls, just in case you were thinking that I was going to give out badges or certificates. I don't, sorry. We've got a balloon. It's going to lift the hands up and we look overhead if we can. And then just before the balloon goes out of reach, we bring our hands on top and pull it down. So if you're standing up, and you can do, place the hands on the backs of the thighs. For those of us seated like I am, hands on the side or on the top, and then we just hinge forward from the hips. Let the hands travel down, maybe to the knees. Bring the hands around to the fronts of the legs and then just come back upright. Okay, and again, it's worth just checking in to see how you feel. Does that feel okay? Through the torso, through the back? Is it inducing any dizziness? If it is, stop. Don't carry on. I'd rather you feel that you're comfortable in the movement. But if you do feel okay, once again, that balloon carries the hands upwards. We bring the hands on top to stop it getting away from us so that we can push it down. Once again, hands in place. Hinging back if you're standing up, coming forwards if you sat down. And again, if we've stayed within a comfortable range of motion and we continue to do so, we may find that our range of motion just gradually increases all by itself without us having to start any big stretching type movements or efforts. Simply by staying within a comfortable range of motion is actually enough to actually encourage the body to gain a bit more flexibility. And if you get the idea and the kind of flow of the movement, then you can just kind of gently connect everything together and have this nice rhythm of hinging forwards, coming back upright, and then I'm going to do one more overhead. Bring the hands down. To the sides. Final hinge or lean or bend forward and then come back upright. and that's that. And we've got those two movements that can be the trickiest movements out the way. Penultimate movement, so movement number 7. Sometimes it gets called different names. Stare fiercely is one of those names. I like to call it pull the boat because it kind of is far more redolent of that movement than any other, I think. Let me join those people who are standing again. Okay. So if you're standing, see if we can have a wider stance. If you're seated, again, have a sense of being prepared to use that torso of yours. We've got a boat out in the distance on some water. It could be a lake. It could be beside the sea. See if you can picture a scene. Maybe you've been somewhere nice on holiday and you can picture a scene, whether it's this country or anywhere else in the world. And you're going to bring the hands, tuck the elbows in, make loose little fists. Hands are tucked in like so. Pick a hand, doesn't matter which, reach out, turn it over, take a wrap around our rope that connects us to the boat and pull that boat towards us. And as we do so, we begin to reach out with the opposite hand. Take a wrap and pull. So you can see that we need to brace a little bit. It's not a big boat, not a ship, more like a rowing boat. But you can picture what kind of boat, the colour, the material that it's made from. How many people could fit into or onto your boat? You can picture the texture and colour and material of the rope that you are pulling. If you get really into the details, you can feel that the rope is wet and damp because it's being drawn through the water as well. And the more that you can picture the scene, the more our muscles are engaged in this pulling movement as we wrap and pull and we bring our boat steadily to shore as smoothly as possible. So we're trying to cause as little disturbance as we can. You could maybe picture that it's very early morning and we want to draw that boat towards us and not disturb the wildlife or just the atmosphere. Okay, clearly we could be here all day if we wanted to be, but we haven't got all day. So I'm going to suggest the next 2 pulls are our last pulls. So make this, whichever hand it is, your penultimate pull. And then whichever hand it is, last pull. And imagine that we bring that boat gently either into shore or towards your jetty or wherever you are. And then you can imagine a journey somewhere. Could be like the Italian lakes. There you go. That's what's popped to my mind. Never been, but they always look lovely. If anyone's been there, let me know and I'll see if I can get there one day. Okay, last movement. So the last movement is actually a very tricky movement, particularly for people with lower limb loss, because it demands a lift onto the balls of the feet, which actually is really difficult. So I've kind of gotten used to now swapping that movement out and picking a different movement that maybe suits our needs a little better. And I always like using one of the bird movements from either Shibashi or 5 Animals or some of the Daoyin movements. So I'm going to get us to take flight. So I'm going to sit down for the last movement, and I'm going to try and make it a little bit of a challenge. There's going to be a bit of a shift of weight, whether we're seated or standing. So this is Phoenix Takes Flight. It's got a very ballet type movement. So I always like that sensibility. So it's going to make our muscles work a bit through the torso. We're going to be shifting weight from either one hip and then to the other if we're sat down. And if you're stood up, again, shifting weight from one leg to the other. Not completely, but let's see if we can have a bit of weight shift as we go. We start in a very ballet-like position with the hands coming round in this nice round shape from the root of the shoulder through the elbow through to the hands. Okay, and we're going to do wing beats, big glorious wing beats. You're a phoenix rising. So I'm going to shift some weight to the right, look up, and just take a big wing beat as I do so. If the hands can come together at the top, so much the better, but don't force things. Let the hands come down on your wings, and then we change sides and we do the same thing, a big wing beat to the left, looking up. So you can see why I have this kind of analogy of it being very ballet-like. On the right side again, and you can probably feel just how much it gets the muscles of the torso engaged. So it's a jolly good balance movement, helping us build some strength, particularly in the muscles that stabilize the trunk. And we just go from one side to the other, very simply. Breathe comfortably. Again, it's a movement that if you do feel like it, you could have a really big breath in as the hands go overhead and then just let the breath go. But again, because the body's working quite hard, you might find that you quickly kind of run out of breath, or not run out of breath, but the breath just simply can't sync comfortably with the movement. Okay, I'm going to do one more. Don't worry which side you're on. But imagine we're in the ballet class, so we need to come back to that start position and then let the hands fall away. Maybe we were in Swan Lake and we now get a big round of applause. That would be quite good, wouldn't it? And there you go, crikey, that's brought us right to the top of the hour. So there you go, 8 strands of brocade, some little variations, seated and standing. I hope that's been enjoyable, a little bit challenging, enough at least to get some benefits in terms of strength and balance and coordination. And also there's a sense of relaxation as well. So let me stop the recording. If you want to hang around and ask any questions or make any comments, I've got a bit of time to do so. Or if you need to get off, get your tea, as they say, do just give me a wave. And we'll see you next time.